Stanton Carlyle pulls a corpse wrapped in a cloth, pushing it into a hole dug inside the hall of a rundown house. He puts on his hat, setting the old wooden house ablaze. He walks outside into an open field, with the flames from the house touching the sky. He boards a bus and quickly falls asleep, waking at the sound of the driver hitting the brakes to stop at their destination. Stepping out, Stan encounters a traveling carnival and discovers a show featuring a peculiar man called Geek, said to be half animal. The announcer, Clem Hotley, boasts about Geek's ability to survive without food or water for weeks. The wild man then catches and bites into a living chicken, shocking the audience. Disgusted, Stan exits but is approached by Major and Bruno, who think he needs a job, and Bruno offers him work. At night, Stan worked with other loaders, and after their work is done, all of them are paid, but Clem deducts a quarter from Stan's wage as the charge for watching the Geek eat. As he is about to leave, Clem offers him more work at the carnival. Later at their new site, as all of them are eating, Clem announces that the Geek has escaped and they all need to catch him. Carlyle with another man goes inside the funhouse. He proceeds alone, hesitantly, and finds the Geek sitting alone. He tells him that he can run away, but the Geek mutters something, "I am not like this." As Carlyle approaches him, the Geek suddenly picks up a rock and hits him on the head in an attempt to escape, but fails when Clem catches him. Both Carlyle and Clem carry him to his enclosure and lock him up. Clem tells Carlyle that he could sleep. Carlyle wakes up tired, dreaming of the house he left burning, an old man, and the sight of the Geek biting into the chicken's neck. He goes about the carnival for a while in the morning until he comes across Lady Zena's place, where asks if he could use the tub. She tells him the charges and proceeds to wake her husband up to leave. He strips, stepping into the tub. Zena wanted to recruit this easy-on-the-eye man to her mind-reading show of the carnival. The next day, Stan worked as the card-collecting boy for Zene's mind-reading show, which was nearly ruined by her drunk husband Pete. However, Molly stepped in to help Zene. Later that night at their home, Pete demonstrated an old trick. Zene took Stan's watch and asked Pete to describe it. Pete detailed its features and then recounted how Stan had stolen it, sharing a disturbing story linked to a death, making Stan a bit uneasy before abruptly stopping. He then gave Stan a notebook, revealing that his act was based on code words and numbers. Clem shows Stan his collection of preserved fetuses at the carnival. Later, while delivering alcohol for Zene's show, Stan asks Pete to teach him tricks, and Pete agrees. That night, Stan reflects on the day's events and visits Geek, offering him a cigarette. The next morning, Stan pitches an idea to improve Molly's show with an electric chair, but she insists she's happy with what she has. Bruno and Major warn Stan not to hurt Molly. Stan suggests to Molly that they leave the carnival for a better life, but she dismisses the idea. Clem calls Stan and tells him that Geek is sick. The two of them took him to a hospital, where Clem leaves the Geek at the door. At a cafe later while having dinner, he tells Stan upon inquiry how he got people to geek for him. He tells him how they were mostly just opium addicts whom he groomed as per his needs, showing how ruthless he was. Later, as Stan fixes the stage for Zene's show the next morning, Pete teaches him one of his tricks. Pete asks Stan to bring him some alcohol from Clem's stash, and he refuses but eventually agrees. As he fetches the bottle secretly, he finds Pete has fallen asleep out of curiosity. Stan tries to read Pete's handbook, but Pete wakes up startling him and telling him that the book contains things that could be misused. Understanding the severity, Stan leaves him alone for the night. The next morning, Bruno brings the news of Pete's death to Zene. Later, Stan notices outside the carnival cops are coming to the place, and he rushes to Clem's tent to warn him of the upcoming threat. Clem instructs him to keep them at bay while he hides the Geek, or else they all will be in trouble. Stan takes charge of the situation very smartly as he engages the sheriff in one of Pete's old tricks, talking to him in a swaying yet convincing manner, showing as if he had truly known the unknown. After explaining to everyone how he saved the day, Stan goes around looking for Molly, who stood alone in one of the tents. She tells him how she was ready to leave with him, but they are interrupted by Bruno and Major. Molly screams as Bruno punches Stan on the ground, only to stop when Molly announces that the two of them are leaving. One last time, Stan visits Zene, who, still mourning the loss of her beloved husbands, sits on the patio smoking a cigarette. Stan offers her Pete's notebook back, but she refuses, saying he had earned it with a smile on her face. Silently, Stan gets in the truck where Molly sits. The two of them leave for their new life full of possibilities. 2 years later, Molly sits rehearsing the mind-reading show, and beside her sits Stan, lost in past. He sees himself sitting inside the burning house he left behind. Years back, he finds himself sitting at the bedside of his old man, who is in his last hour. As Stan tells him he needs him, he abruptly wakes up from his dream and tells Molly to continue rehearsing for their shows tomorrow. The next day at the show, Stan gracefully predicts the object in Molly's hand. As the audience watches, bewildered, unaware of the code language they speak with, among the spectators sat a curious woman. Unsatisfied with her performance, Stan tells Molly how she screwed up and should be prepared for the next show. At the next performance, things go on smoothly until the curious woman stands up, presents her purse, and asks a blindfolded Stan to guess the object, not before telling Molly not to speak clearly with the object of exposing exposing this mentalist. However, Stan ever gracefully took control of the situation. Even without receiving hints from his partner, he guessed the contents of the purse, strengthening his claim as a mentalist. He didn't stop there. He wanted to humiliate this person who just tried to expose him, so he started guessing about her past life, her trauma, and her sorrow. He quickly shifted his focus to another old man sitting at the table and started to speak to him about someone he had just lost. And then he fainted, as if overwhelmed by his powers. In the room, Molly confronted him about playing with the feelings of the two. She tells him he shouldn't have lied like that, and that's when a man knocks on their door, announcing that someone had requested a private audience with Stan, which he accepts, telling Molly that he will apologize if it's the two people from the show. The old man from the table introduced himself as Judge Kimball, whereas the woman was his psychologist, Dr. Lilith Ritter. Kimball needed Stan to conduct a private session for him to help him get over his grief of a lost loved one, and Stan, even against Molly's advice, agreed. As Molly walks away angry at Stan's actions, he tries to convince her that it is for good. However, she stops midway to make a phone call, and Stan leaves her. He later visits the office of Dr. Lilith in hopes of getting something on the judge. Lilith agrees to make the deal with Stan if he was to tell her the truth about himself and his abilities. Meanwhile, Molly calls her friends at the carnival, asking them to visit her before they close for winter. After the private show for Judge Kimball, Stan visited Lilith as part of their agreement. She bombarded him with questions about his past, including his aversion to alcohol, which seemed to overwhelm him. Lilith enjoyed probing his mind until Stan jolted at the mention of his father and Pete, revealing he felt responsible for Pete's death. He also shared that his mother left with another man because his father wasn't strong enough, insisting he would never be like his father. Back at the hotel, Stan found the carnival group, including Molly, Major, Bruno, and Zine, in his room. As the Major and Molly danced, Zine warned Stan again not to do the spook show, citing her cards. When he pulled 3 cards, they indicated his downfall and impending end. On his last meeting with Judge Kimball's wife, Stan used his wit to make her believe she was talking to her deceased son. Once done, he immediately visited Lilith's office to deliver her share, which she refused to take. Stan carries on telling her that Kimball wanted him to meet another client named Ezra Grindle. However, Lilith warns him that Grindle is a former patient of hers, a cunning rich man. She warns Stan that dealing with Grindle has consequences, but he still agrees. Stan arrives at Grindle's place with Judge Kimball, where a rude bodyguard thoroughly searches him. Inside, he meets Ezra Grindle, who instructs him to take a polygraph test to prove his worth. Tensed yet determined, Stan confidently answers questions and ultimately fools the machine by pretending to communicate with Grindle's deceased loved one. Later, he seeks information from Lilith about Grindle, but she refuses, citing his danger. However, while she briefly steps out, Stan manages to get a key imprint from her locker containing patient records. When Lilith returns and reveals a significant scar, Stan shows affection by kissing the scar. He returns to Lilith's office with duplicate key, finding the tape of Grindle's session. He discovers Grindle forced an abortion on a woman named Dory, which led to her death. Stan uses this dark information in his next meeting with Grindle, manipulating him emotionally for a generous payout. Grindle asks Stan to reconnect him with his lost lover, but Stan declines, citing Grindle's sins. Instead, he collaborates with Lilith to present Molly as Ezra's lover. As their relationship deepens and they kiss, Stan dramatically toasts with liquor in hand. Later, Stan explains his entire plan to Molly, convincing him that doing so will give Grindle closure and bring him no harm. He tells her about how he saved the marriage of Kimball's by helping them. Molly agrees but later leaves Stan when she sees Lilith's sketch in Stan's book, getting suspicious of their relationship. Meanwhile, Stan has been given an ultimatum by Ezra to arrange the meeting or else he will face consequences. On the other hand, Judge Kimball gets shot by his wife, who later commits suicide in the hopes of reuniting with her dead son. Stan runs behind Molly and convinces her that this is the last time and makes her stay. Outside the garden, Stan explains his plan to Molly one last time. Once with Grindle, he asks him to send away his bodyguard, and they walk into the garden. However, just as Molly is about to appear dressed as Dory, Grindle hesitates, confessing his sin. Stan pushes him to seek forgiveness, but when Molly arrives, Grindle runs towards her and embraces her. This reveals to him that she is a fake, leading to a violent confrontation between him and Stan. Stan brutally beats Grindle to death and crushes Anderson with his car while fleeing with Molly, who then leaves him for good. Stan visits Lilith's office one last time to collect his cash. He passionately kisses her goodbye, but before he can leave, Lilith announces that she loves him. He turns to face her confused but happy. However, her demeanor soon changes as she presses record and dramatically starts her session. Confused with what was happening, Stan immediately opens the bag of cash only to find it filled with blanks. He asks Lilith why she is doing this, but she cunningly blames his mental health. However, in reality, she was only taking revenge for the humiliation he brought on her on their first meeting. Stan angrily walks towards her, but she pulls out her pistol and shoots his ear off, having to run away once the security came. Stan took shelter in a freight train on the dark winter night. As the train starts moving, he remembers how he killed his father. Months later, he wakes up with his hair overgrown and clothes torn up. He visits a carnival, hoping to find work as a mentalist, but the owner doesn't show interest. However, the owner does offer him a particular job that could help him get by, as he offered him liquor. Stan accepts the offer laughing as he remembers how years ago Clem had explained how he managed to get a guy to geek. So that was the recap for the 2021 movie Nightmare Alley. For more movie recaps like this, stay subscribed to the channel and check this video out as well.